Welcome to Breaking Par with Bernard Sheridan, the golf podcast that interviews the best and brightest minds in the golf industry. Now, here's your host, Bernard Sheridan.
So, Mark, welcome to Breaking Par. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Bernard. Looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us first, and what we always like to ask first is, when's the first time that you really fell in love with golf, or I want to say picked up a golf club? And then when was that aha moment when you thought, you know what, I want to do this. I want to do this for a living.
I'd say my earliest memory would have to be probably 3 or 4 years old. I had one of those plastic sets of clubs, and I would just whack the ball around the backyard. And even from a really young age, my parents told me that I would just sit and watch golf on TV. And not a lot of little kids do that.
No.
And so that's certainly my earliest memory. I really enjoyed playing golf with my grandfather. That was a special time anytime we got to play on the course. Because we weren't close geographically. So anytime that we were on vacation, got to see him, and we always made golf part of that. And golf was always a privilege for me. I think my family didn't have a lot of money growing up, so I didn't get to play as much as a country club kid. So I still look at it that way. Every time I'm on the course, it's a privilege. It's a great opportunity, and I think that fueled some of the love as well. And then then once I got out of school and had the opportunity to coach golf, and somebody said, we're going to pay you to coach golf and be on the golf course, then I said, sign me up.
So that's great. That's a great story. And I know that for me, too, I was not a country club kid at all. But I really didn't pick it up until I was probably about a little bit over 30. Is when I really got involved with it, and then I just kind of went full bore right away.
Yeah,
and just kind of fell in love with it.
Yeah, my first sport was actually basketball. That I played both basketball and a little golf in college, but I was definitely better at basketball at that time. But the golf is the one that's just stuck with me the whole time.
Yeah, for me it was probably baseball. Was really the first sport that I played. And really loved. Fooled around with basketball. Was always a lot shorter than all the other kids, so didn't do too well at that. And then kind of fell in love with hockey too, and that was more like when I was a teenager. It was easier to get a hockey game going than it was to get a basketball or a baseball game going, because you didn't need as many guys, you know.
And all that translates into being a good golfer at the end.
Yeah. Yep, all that hand-and-eye coordination, a lot of the same motor skills, a lot of the same motion, a lot of body-oriented delivering the hockey stick or delivering the baseball bat, or it's funny how when we see a lot of players when they go to do golf, they kind of do the opposite of what they do on all these other sports.
For sure. I mean, it's really interesting with a few of the kids I worked with this year. We played some other games like washers and cornhole and things that just require some hand-eye coordination. And you could really see who the athletes were and who the kids were that hadn't played those other sports and had only played golf. And to me, I've always enjoyed having athletic kids and intelligent kids. Those are the ones that develop the fastest.
So what are the groups that you're working with the most? Are you working mostly with juniors, or are you working with, all different age groups? Or I know that for me, I'm in Florida. The bulk of the people that I'm working with are over 50. I work a little bit with juniors, but the bulk of what I'm doing is mostly older players.
Yeah, the majority of who I work with would be juniors. When it comes to the mental game, everyone needs to get stronger at that side. And so I've worked with retired gentlemen down to 10, 12-year-olds. So there's a full range there. But the golfers that I coach a couple of teams are high school age. And okay. I've done some work with a few college players.
So, and is the mental game what you're working on the most with them?
Yeah, that's my primary focus, and that's where I think you can have the most impact. It translates beyond the golf course, and it's really a fascination of mine of just performance and excellence.
So, what are some of the things that, or I want to say, some of the things that you work with them on? I understand it's mental game, but are there little things that you do that kind of help them translate that into their golf swing? And is it pre-shot routine? Is it a mental state of mind? Is it target focused? I mean, what are the things that you touch base on?
Sure. There are a number of like skills and attributes that I like to work with and help golfers develop. And so when it comes to skills, I think there are four big skills that any golfer can use, and that'd be the ability to breathe, to maintain their energy levels. Goal setting is huge. The ability to visualize or mentally rehearse the shot they're about to hit, and then how they talk to themselves. So those are the big four that I'll address with anyone I work with. I think the biggest challenge, though, for golfers is their ability to stay present and really engaged and focused on the shot at hand. Golfers, I think, more than any other sport, have a tendency to either live in the past or live in the future. And that really shows up in, I like to call it storytelling. Take a good golfer who's coming up the 18th fairway, and they know at the end of that round, when they hole out on 18, the first question they're going to get is, what'd you shoot? How'd you play? And so they're formulating that story they're going to tell. And for some of them, they've been formulating that the entire round. It's, well, I lipped out on 1, I got a bad bounce on 3, didn't putt very well on 4, hit a divot mark on 8, and so they're working on that story. Or they're getting ready to explain, how great they played. And in either case, they're thinking both in the past and in the future, and frequently at the same time. They're trying to relive past shots. Maybe they're still regretting a bad shot or a bad decision, or they're thinking ahead, well, I'm about to shoot a career low, or I'm about to win. And then they're thinking about, well, what's the story I'm going to tell afterwards? And their head's not present. And when their head's not present, then they're not locked in to the shot at hand, and that is where they get themselves in trouble. I think it plays out too in they start having those thoughts again, whether it's thinking about the past shot that wasn't very good, and now they start to lapse into technical thoughts, or they're thinking ahead of, hey, if I make this putt or I make this shot, I'm going to shoot this number. In either case, now they start getting more technical. They're starting to think about the swing. They've shifted what part of the brain they're using, and instead of allowing that natural process of swinging the club, now it becomes much more conscious. They're trying to control the swing. Either they're trying to fix that bad swing, or they're trying to make sure they make a great swing. And in both cases, now they're using the wrong part of the brain, and they're going to get the wrong result, and not the one they want.
Now, what do you think causes that in golf, but it's not caused in other sports? Is it because there's a lot of downtime in between? Or, because like in baseball, let's say, if you're on deck and you see the score, you're not really thinking about, I have to hit a home run, or I have to hit, and if I hit a home run, then we'll be ahead by this. And usually you're just thinking about, I just need to time what's going on out there with the pitches right now, so that when I get up there, my timing is good, so I can get a hit. As opposed to with golf, it's kind of like the ball's sitting there, and you have all the, or you just hit the ball, and now you're on your way to the ball, so you could already be thinking about the end of the hole and what's going to happen in your score. because you have this downtime. It's not like it's all happening right away, instantaneously.
Yeah, when you look at sports science, and we refer to open skills and closed skills. And so a closed skill would be something that has a distinct start and a distinct finish. The golf swing is a perfect example. Target shooting is a good example. Serving a tennis ball, there's a clear start to that. And there's a designated time when it's going to start, when it's going to end. That creates much more time versus a sport like basketball or soccer that's continuous and free flowing. And now it's much more reactive, and you see the ball, you respond to it. And that's the difference. I think you have that time to think, to start to look forwards, as opposed to just reacting to what the ball has done, or better word probably is responding to what the opposition is doing. And when we're in that moment, then we tend to be using our unconscious state of mind versus being more conscious and processing.
Right. So what is a way, or what is a thing that you use with your students for that in-between time when they're, let's say, processing what they're about to do or what's going to happen, and do you have them wait until they get to the ball, or do you have them? I mean, I know that for me, a lot of times when I'm working with students in that way, I'll say to them, look, let's not think about, like, once we hit the ball, it's over. We're going to accept whatever happened. And let's not think about what we're going to do next until we get to the ball and see what we have to do next. I find that a lot of players will hit a ball, think they're in the rough, and all of a sudden they're thinking about what they got to do to get out of the rough, and they're not going to make it to the green now, or things like that. And then that's just like a negative thought that kind of starts to build momentum in their mind, and then by the time they get there, it's a lot worse than what they thought, or it's a lot less worse than what they thought. But they've built it up in their mind that it's not going to be good.
Yeah, I call that fortune telling, time traveling. They're getting way ahead of themselves. And so what you're telling your students is exactly right. You hit the shot. I say you've got 2 seconds to recognize, evaluate the shot. Yes, I was committed to it. And I like a quick review. Was I committed to that shot? Did I have a good feel for the shot? Did I have a good picture of what it looked like? How's my tempo? That's a quick evaluation. And then it's move on. I think golfers engage in a lot of judgment instead of evaluation. And so they start to assign a judgment. Oh, that was a terrible shot, versus that shot went right. Or I can't believe you hit it that badly, versus you caught it a groove low. And so just making the difference there in how you evaluate the shot sets them up to move forward. It's a more mindful approach of recognizing this was a shot. Let's be objective about it. And now let's move on. And then we'll make a decision about what happens next once we reach the ball. Because like you say, you don't know what the lie is. You don't know what kind of bounce you'll get. You don't know, maybe you have a window through the trees if you missed a fairway. You just don't know, and so you're creating undue stress and aggravation and frustration, and over a course of a round, that's just going to exhaust you and frustrate you, and that, like you say, it builds, and the net result is poorer play. So let's get to the ball, and then let's start our process. And so once you arrive there, you really need a trigger or something that says, this is when I start my process. For some people, it's when they set their bag down. For some people, it's when they determine the yardage. Louis Oosthuizen liked to look at a red dot on his glove when we won the Open at St. Andrews.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And so that was a trigger a technique that he used that reminded himself to let's focus on this shot, because he even said it was really easy to start looking ahead and think, well, I'm going to win the Open, and so rather than engaging in that thought process, just looking at that red dot was a reminder to himself to let's be present, let's focus on this shot, let's go through our routine. And so there needs to be something distinct that starts your process, and then execute the shot, and then evaluate the shot objectively, and then go find it.
So what about these guys who, like, they're out there with their weekend foursome, and when they hit a bad shot, they're always ribbing each other. I mean, that happens.
Oh yeah.
And they're trying to get in the other guy's head, and stuff like that. And so, like, what do you do to stop them from getting in your head? I mean, is there a way to do, is there exercises that you can do or say to yourself? Because I know that, golf, just like in life, whatever we mentally portray it to be is what it becomes. And if we look positively, usually positive outcomes happen. And if we look negatively, then usually negative outcomes happen. But when there's a lot of trash talk going on, it's kind of hard to I mean, I guess, and some guys kind of thrive on that. That actually makes them feel more positive than negative, even if they did hit a bad shot.
Yeah, everyone's an individual, and that's what I always try to remind players is that what works for you is what works for you. And what works for somebody else, it might be a different approach. I like to compare it to a combination lock. You find the combination, and for the players I work with, I say you have the combination. It's just a matter of us determining what that combination is. But once you know the combination, then you can unlock your performance. Well, when it comes to those guys giving you the business after you hosel one or dump one in a bunker, that, I think part of it's remembering, why do I play? Why am I out here in the first place? Is it to be fun? Is it social? Is it because I like to compete? Am I working towards something in the future? If it's my weekend foursome, it's probably more social. And okay, so why am I here? What am I trying to accomplish by being out here? And so that's always important. Remember why you're playing. And then I think another thing you want to look at is, what are like, what are they trying to do? Are they just trying to give you a hard time? Is it because you just gave them the business on the last hole, or are they trying to get in your head to win this bet? I think you just acknowledge it and recognize, what they're trying to do. And then last is, I see weekend golfers all the time who look at them, who act like they should be a tour player and get upset when they don't hit a tour level shot, when they don't practice and they don't work out and they don't train them. Then they expect to perform like somebody who does all of those things.
Right.
So, let's be a little bit more accepting, and remember, your golf score isn't who you are. Your golf swing isn't who you are. Golf's something you do, and it's not even your profession. So let's be careful about what kind of importance we place on it and our relationships. And again, come back to why am I playing this in the first place, and why are we here?
Or is there a series of tests that you run students through to kind of get their mental profile as to get a better idea as to what things work best for them?
There are a couple of approaches I use. So one, anytime I meet with a player, we always just sit down and I run through a series of questions that go back to, why do you play golf? What are you trying to accomplish? What are your goals? What's your background? And so that's just a conversation that we always have. It's not a formal test or assessment. There are some players I work with who want a little deeper look. And if that's the case, Then I'll use a golf psych assessment with them. Are you familiar with golf psych?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll use that system with those who really want to dive in and look at their personality. That's the more serious player who's really wanting to make an investment. But what I find with most people is it's more just the conversation, and very quickly we can start to identify where their struggles are and where their strengths are, and then work in that direction.
Now, do you find that the majority of the players that you're playing with that come to you for the mental side of the game, are most of them better players? Are they single digit handicap, or are they, the weekend warrior type guy?
It's a mix. It really is. Like I said, you might have the retired gentleman who just, wants to break 90, and just wants to do that a few more times, and knows that he's getting older, he's losing distance, but if he could just be a little more consistent here and there, then he'd still enjoy the game. And then you have juniors who, want to play college, and they hit the shots. They have the ability to do it. It's a matter of putting it into action on the golf course and doing it for 18 holes and not 16 or 17 holes. And so it's a full range. And that's what I enjoy, because everyone's unique. Everyone's a new challenge. But it all comes down to helping them do what they love to do better.
Sure. Now, is there any type of technology that you use with your players? Like, do you use Focus Band or anything like that at all?
Yeah, I do. I use 3 different devices. Well, actually more than that, but I do use Focus Band. Done some work with our players with that. Debbie Cruz out at Arizona State has a system called Opti, which is a little bit more robust, gives a little more data than the Focus Band does. And so I've been doing some experimentation with that as well. With Golf Psych, their app is called the Mind Meter. So I've used each of those 3 with individuals. And then something that really simple that I like to use with individuals is measuring heart rate variability, which, you get an earpiece, measure, and then hook it up to your phone or your iPad, and just practice managing that variability. That's a very simple and a much more affordable technology that players can pick up. And so I've had some good results with that, of just helping people, start to recognize how their thoughts impact their physiology, and that's a really, really simple way to show that what you think about changes your heart rate, and if just your thoughts change your heart rate, what's that doing to your golf swing? So those are the devices I like to use.
Yeah, I mean, and that's true. But most people, I think, don't really understand that part of it. They really don't think about that they're thinking certain things, and it's going to change maybe their tempo or their heart rate or any of those other things, which is going to affect their performance. I think that most players aren't really thinking about that. I mean, and I think also that those players, unless they go to a mental coach and start to understand those things, it doesn't even cross their mind.
Exactly. I think one of the primary objectives for working with any player is helping their own self-awareness, of just starting to recognize, this is what I do when. This is how I respond when I'm on the first tee and there's a big gallery. This is what I'm doing when it's a practice round. This is what happens when I start the round off 3 birdies. What happens? What happens if I start with 3 bogeys? And just recognizing what's going on. What are they thinking about? How are they feeling, both physically and emotionally? And just being aware of what happens. That to me is huge. Once people start to recognize it, then you can have that conversation and come up to a player and say, what happened there? They said, well, okay, so I wasn't really committed to that shot. I just didn't like it. I said, okay, so now you recognize you weren't committed to it. So what's our focus on the next shot? We're going to be committed to that shot. And that doesn't mean they're not going to stop doing it, but they start to become more aware and they can catch themselves sooner. And I think that's a huge piece to the puzzle.
Yeah, they become a little bit more in the present then.
Absolutely. Yeah. If I'm aware of what I'm thinking right now, then as opposed to what's in the past or what's in the future, then we can start to really dial in our performance. And that's where we start to get power. I think there's an element too. Sometimes golfers have a bit of fear. That's a word I hear a lot from my players. Well, I was afraid the ball was going to go over there. I was afraid to hit it right. And so anytime you're approaching something from fear, now you've fired up your physiology again. The amygdala starts to fire. You get into that fight or flight response, and that's never good for the golf swing because it introduces tension and it changes your tempo. And so anytime I hear that word, then that's where I say, okay, notice what we just said there. Notice your approach there. So are you avoiding something? I don't want to hit it over there. Or are we focusing on where we do want the ball to go and what we do want to happen? And again, that comes back to their awareness. When they start to recognize what their thoughts are, then they can really start to notice and, like you say, be present.
Yeah, I know that. I work occasionally with another instructor. His name is Alan Burton. I'm going to give him kudos on this because this really goes to what we're saying here. You said, I don't want to hit it right, or I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that. So what he said to me, we were doing a golf school up in Georgia a few weeks ago, and he said to me, it's like when you walk into Baskin and Robbins, you don't tell them every flavor you don't want. You tell them the flavor you do want. You don't even think about the flavors you don't want. And it's the same thing on the golf course. You shouldn't think about that you don't want to hit it in the sand, or you don't want to hit it in the water, or you don't want to hit it right. You should just think about where do you want to hit it, not even worry about the other things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the brain doesn't understand don't. There's an old example of don't think about a pink elephant. Well, what image did you just create?
Yep.
So we can't say don't because the brain doesn't understand that. And so let's think about what we do want to do.
Now, do you think it's because as children, our parents, when we were doing something that we weren't supposed to do, or we're going to touch something that maybe would hurt us or whatever, they would always say, don't do that. As opposed to saying, why don't you do this instead of that? This is better for you. And I don't know whether it's just a gut reaction that parents say that because that's what was said to them. And then, of course, we do the same thing to ourselves. We have that internal talk of don't do this, don't do that, don't be a dummy, don't hit it fat, things like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought about it as far as what parents. I think honestly, as a parent, it's just faster to say, "Don't touch that."
Right.
As opposed to, let's think about touching something else. And at that age, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years old, I think they're really concrete thinkers. So that's really to the point. I think with golfers, a lot of it stems from golf commentators. So if the next time you listen to a golf broadcast, think about the number of times the commentators talk about, well, there's a hazard down the left side, or there are 2 deep bunkers on the right side, and we want to make sure we avoid. So they're constantly talking about the trouble.
Yeah.
And that's their job. They're trying to create drama. And so if you watch a lot of golf, which the golfers we work with do, and they're listening to Johnny Miller or Nick Faldo, they're talking about the trouble.
Yep.
And so I think they bring some of that. It's almost like they bring the inner golf commentator with them out on the golf course. And now they're thinking, oh yeah, well, we want to lay up to avoid that bunker, or we don't want to hit it left, or that's no man's land over there. And so I think they carry a little bit of that with them subconsciously, and then that's and so it's either them or it's their playing partners who say, "Oh, don't hit it over there again," or
Yeah.
and so I think
Or even caddies will say, you want to stay away from this side because this will happen. And then you won't have a good approach shot into as opposed to saying, you really want to hit it down the left side here because that'll give you the best approach into the green.
Absolutely.
I mean, and so it's easy to say the same thing, but to say it with a positive twist as opposed to a negative twist. And the problem is that most people explain things through the negative of what not to do, not what to do.
I agree. I think I wish I could cite the study on this, but the statistic I've heard is just the negative commentary that we engage in, the thought process is somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of our thoughts. And that's constantly running in the background.
Yeah.
And it has to be a conscious decision to frame things differently. And I know as a coach that over my time, I've worked really hard to change how I talk to my players and to change their focus of what are we looking to accomplish, where do we want this ball to go, as opposed to where we don't want it to go.
Yeah, I know that for me, too, I do the same thing. I always try to be more positive reinforcement, try to tell them what we want to achieve here, not what we don't want to achieve. And I find that it accelerates the learning process and allows them to better understand what their goal is, as opposed to what not to do. I usually don't say stop throwing it over the top. I'll say you need to push off your back foot so that you can come more from the inside here. You want to use your body more than your arms, and that'll give you a better position into the ball and give you the opportunity to get out of your own way. And I think that helps a lot, and I know that for myself, even in life, I try to have more positive dialogue than negative. It's very easy to dwell on negative, and I find that no matter what thought process you put your mind in, it's kind of like there's other thought processes that want to join it, and they're usually of the same.
Mm-hmm. One quote I like to use with my players is really old wisdom. It's from Lao Tzu, and he said, if you're depressed, you're living in the past, and if you're anxious, you're living in the future, and if you're at peace, you're living in the present. And I think that's really true. They're either depressed with golfers, they're either depressed about the shot they just hit, or they're worried about the shot they're about to hit. And if we can help them find more peace on the golf course, they're going to enjoy their time much more.
Absolutely true. That's a good way to put it, for sure. So, are there any books that you would recommend on the mental game that you feel would be beneficial to our listeners out there?
Yeah, and I'll recommend a couple with this caveat. I was talking to a Division I coach earlier this spring, and I said, what do you guys do to train your athletes on the mental game? I said, well, we give them some books, and I wanted to say, did you teach your players to learn golf by reading a book? And so there is a little bit of an idea out there, I think, that, well, I can just go read a book, but we don't learn to play golf that way. We go work with an instructor. We go work with a strength and conditioning coach or somebody that's TPI certified to get better physically. So we should be working with a mental coach too to get better on the mental game. But that being said, the golf industry especially has a lot of books out there. I think anything written by Bob Rotella is good. Golf is Not a Game of Perfect is certainly a good read. So, but anything by Rotella is worth reading. I definitely like anything by Lynn and Pia.
Yeah, me too.
And they've got a brand new book out that I'm looking forward to reading. They're and I like their approach to being present and thinking about the shot and at the proper time. And then when it's time to hit the shot, we're not thinking. And so again, any of their books are worth a read. A book that's not written for golfers but is an excellent read is called Heads Up Baseball by Ken Ravizza. Ken, longtime sports psychologist, works with the Chicago Cubs now, and is good friends with Joe Maddon, so they have a long history working together. And Ken says he doesn't see the point of golf, but I'm still going to reference his book because it's so good. And even though it's written towards a baseball mind, you can take everything out of there and translate it directly to golf. And so those would be some books that I would check in for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. So if there's anybody out there in our listening audience who would be interested in touching base with you, working with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So my website is www.coachmarkcheney.com. So Coach Mark, and then Cheney is CHENEY.com. That's also my Twitter handle. That's also my Instagram. And my email is mark@coachmarkcheney.com. So if you hit my Twitter page, if you hit my website, either one of those have a direct link to my email. And that's a great way. Instant message me. Social media is huge now for golfers. And so that's an easy way. And website's even got a phone number on there too. So website, Twitter, email, they all work.
Sounds great. Well, Mark, thanks so much for being with us. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. And what we always like to say in parting is until we meet again, try to keep it in the short grass.
Outstanding. Thanks a lot, Bernard.
All right, take care.
You've been listening to Breaking Par with your host, Bernard Sheridan. Follow us on Twitter @BreakingPar and on Facebook @Par Breakers Golf Academy. Until next week, try to keep it on the short grass.